She folded the letter slowly and whispered, "Read this when I'm gone." The palace corridor fell silent as her sons stared, confused and trembling. A mother's hand shook, hiding words no one was meant to see. "My greatest fear was never dying. It was leaving you unprotected." Guards looked away. History held its breath. No one knew this single letter would one day break their understanding of her love and expose the pain she never spoke aloud. Quick question, where are you watching from? The envelope slipped from her fingers and landed between the toys. The late afternoon light stretched across the room, catching dust in the air as Princess Diana stood alone. Her sons were nearby, laughter echoing faintly, unaware of the weight pressing against her chest. She watched them the way mothers do when fear hides behind a smile, memorizing every movement, every sound, every breath. Her hands trembled as she reached for the desk drawer. Inside lay a single envelope, cream-colored, unmarked, untouched. She had written it days earlier, then rewritten it again and again, each version torn apart because none felt strong enough. None felt honest enough. She sat slowly, as if the chair might break under the truth she carried. A deep breath, then another. The pen hovered before touching paper. "I don't know how to protect you forever," she whispered, the words barely audible. The door creaked behind her. Footsteps paused. "Mum?" a small voice asked. She turned instantly, smile ready, eyes shining just enough to hide the fear. "Just a moment, darling," she said softly. He hesitated. "You look sad." Her lips parted, then closed again. "I'm just tired," she replied. He nodded, unconvinced, and padded away. When the door closed, her shoulders collapsed forward. The smile vanished. Her reflection stared back from the glass. Brave, composed, breaking. She began to write. The pen moved faster now. Urgency guiding every line. She didn't explain the palace. She didn't name the pressure. She wrote only what mattered. "I loved you before the world knew you," she murmured. As ink soaked into the page, her hand paused. A tear fell, blurring the words. She wiped it away angrily, as if tears were a luxury she could not afford. Voices echoed in her memory. "You must be careful what you say. You are watched. You are not alone." She wrote anyway. The door opened again, this time more boldly. "Mum, are you coming?" Another voice called. She folded the letter quickly, slipping it into the envelope. Her fingers lingered there, as if letting go meant something final. "Yes," she answered, standing. "I'm coming." She placed the envelope back in the drawer, beneath old notes and forgotten papers. It looked ordinary, invisible, safe. But as she closed the drawer, her hands stayed on the wood longer than necessary. "If anything happens," she whispered to no one, "this will have to speak for me." Outside, her sons laughed again. The sound cut through her like light through darkness. Beautiful, fragile, fleeting. She straightened her posture, wiped her face, and stepped back into the world that expected her to be unbreakable. Behind her, the drawer remained closed. Inside it, the truth waited. "My greatest fear was never dying. It was leaving you unprotected." Years later, when that drawer was finally opened, the words inside would shake the palace to its core. The smile never reached her eyes, and everyone noticed. The palace corridors glittered that evening, polished floors reflecting chandeliers and power. Princess Diana walked through them with practiced grace, shoulders back, chin lifted, every step measured. To the world, she was radiant. To those watching closely, something was wrong. Whispers followed her like shadows. "She's late again," one voice muttered. "She's emotional," another replied quietly. Diana felt them without turning. Years inside these walls had taught her how judgment moved. Soft, sharp, and constant. She took her seat at the long table, folding her hands in her lap. Across from her, faces smiled politely. None asked if she was well. A glass clinked. "We'll begin," a man said coolly. Diana nodded, though her mind drifted to the drawer upstairs, to the envelope hidden beneath old papers, to the words she had written in secret. The discussion moved fast, decisions about schedules, appearances, statements already prepared without her voice. "We've decided this is best," someone said. She inhaled. "I wasn't asked." A pause. Then soft laughter. "You're too sensitive," another voice replied. Her jaw tightened. She kept her tone calm. "They are my sons." A chair shifted. "This isn't about motherhood. It's about image." The word hit harder than intended. Image. She looked down at her hands, fingers still, knuckles pale. Around her, conversation resumed as if nothing had happened. Plans were finalized. Choices were sealed. She was present, but invisible. Later, in the hallway, she approached a familiar figure. "May I speak freely?" she asked. He didn't meet her eyes. "This isn't the time." "When is it?" she pressed. He sighed. "You make things difficult." The sentence lingered between them. sharp and humiliating. She stepped back, stunned. "I'm trying to protect them." "They don't need protecting from us," he said flatly. The door closed. Diana stood alone, breath shallow, heart racing. The walls felt closer now, the air heavier. She pressed a hand to her chest, steadying herself. From behind, a gentle voice broke the silence. "Mum?" She turned instantly. Her sons stood there, dressed neatly, eyes searching her face. "Are you upset?" one asked. She knelt, forcing a smile. "No, my love." They didn't believe her. "You always say that," the other whispered. Her throat tightened. She pulled them close, breathing them in, anchoring herself to their warmth. "I'm right here," she said softly. "Always." But as they walked away moments later, escorted by others, she felt the familiar sting of powerlessness return. That night, alone again, she stood by the window, looking out at the dark grounds. Applause echoed faintly from a distant event. Celebration without her. She thought of the letter, of how words could speak when voices were silenced. She returned to the desk, opened the drawer, and touched the envelope without removing it. "They won't listen," she whispered. But she knew one day, someone would. They heard her voice every day and still chose silence. What Diana didn't know was that someone small had already noticed the injustice and was about to change everything. A small voice spoke from the doorway, soft but impossible to ignore. The study door hadn't fully closed. Diana realized it too late. She stood frozen near the desk, one hand still resting on the drawer, her breathing shallow. Outside, adult voices drifted down the corridor, low, confident, careless. They thought she had left. They thought the room was empty. It wasn't. Behind the door, one of her sons stood perfectly still, barefoot on the cold floor, clutching a toy aeroplane. He had come looking for her. Instead, he found something else. "She's unstable," a man's voice said. Another replied, quieter but firmer. "She's becoming a liability." The boy frowned, not fully understanding the words, only the tone. He leaned closer, heart beating fast. "We must limit her access," the voice continued, "especially to the children." The toy slipped from his hand and hit the floor. Silence. Diana turned sharply. Their eyes met. For a moment, neither spoke. "What did you hear?" she asked gently, already knowing. He swallowed. "They said, 'You're dangerous.'" The word landed like glass shattering. She crossed the room in 2 strides and knelt before him, taking his small hands into hers. "Look at me," she said softly. He did. His eyes were wide, searching. "Am I dangerous?" she asked. He shook his head fiercely. "You're my mum." Her breath caught. She pulled him into her arms, holding him tighter than before, as if the world might take him mid-embrace. "I don't like them," he whispered into her shoulder. She closed her eyes. Footsteps approached again. Diana straightened instantly, smoothing his hair, forcing composure back onto her face. "Go to your room," she said quietly. "Please." "But now," she insisted, softer still. He hesitated, then nodded and slipped away just as the voices returned. Louder now, accompanied by laughter. Diana stood, spine rigid, expression unreadable. Later that night, the boy sat on his bed, staring at the ceiling. The words echoed in his mind, not the ones spoken about his mother, but the way her hands had shaken when she held him. He slid off the bed and crept down the hallway. He knew where she worked. He had watched her enough times. The study was dark, moonlight spilling across the desk. Carefully, he climbed onto the chair and opened the drawer she always closed so gently. Inside were papers, notes, then an envelope. He didn't open it, he only touched it. "She's scared," he whispered to himself. The next morning, Diana noticed the drawer slightly open. Her heart skipped. She closed it slowly, glancing toward the hallway where her son's laughter echoed again. One of them looked back at her, longer than usual, as if he knew something he wasn't supposed to know, as if innocence had already been broken. They called her a threat, but to him she was safety itself. What the child overheard that night would plant a seed, one that would grow into a decision no one saw coming. The meeting began without her, and that was the point. The chair at the head of the table remained empty as voices filled the room. Papers shuffled, decisions formed. Princess Diana stood just outside the door, listening, unseen once again. Her name surfaced only in fragments, never as a person, always as a problem. "She can't attend tomorrow," a voice said. "It's safer if she doesn't," another replied. Diana pushed the door open. The room stiffened. "I'm right here," she said calmly. Silence followed, thick and uncomfortable. Eyes avoided hers. Someone cleared their throat. "This was meant to be brief," a man said. "Then you shouldn't have used my life as the agenda," she replied. A few shifted in their seats. One finally met her gaze. "You're emotional lately," he said, unpredictable. Her lips curved into a slow, wounded smile. I'm their mother. That's not the role in question, he answered. The sentence drained the warmth from the room. Diana stepped forward. You're limiting my time with them. It's temporary. You said that before. No response. She exhaled slowly, fighting the tremor in her hands. They need consistency. They need safety. A woman near the window spoke softly. They need stability. Diana's eyes hardened. Then stop destabilizing their mother. The word mother hung in the air like a challenge. One man stood. This is not an argument you can win. Diana looked around the table at the faces that controlled schedules. Headlines, access, power dressed in politeness. I'm not trying to win, she said quietly. I'm trying to protect. The room fell silent again. But this time it wasn't discomfort. It was dismissal. We've made our decision, the man said. You'll be informed. Diana nodded once. She didn't argue further. She had learned how resistance was punished here. Later that evening, she sat with her sons on the floor, helping them with a puzzle. Laughter returned in pieces, forced but genuine. Are you leaving again? One asked suddenly. Her hand froze mid-piece. Why would you think that? They always take you away, he said simply. She swallowed hard. I'm not going anywhere. But they decide, the other whispered. She gathered them both into her arms, heart aching at how clearly they understood the truth. No one decides that, she said firmly. Yet that night, as she lay awake, footsteps echoed outside her door. Guards changing shifts, doors locking softly. Protection, they called it. She rose quietly and crossed the room. The desk waited in shadow. She opened the drawer and removed the envelope for the first time. Her fingers traced the fold, her breathing uneven. If they take my voice, she whispered, they won't take my truth. She slid the letter into a book and returned it to the drawer. Hidden, but closer now. Ready. Outside, the palace slept peacefully. Inside, a mother prepared for a fight no one could see. They called it protection, but it felt like a cage. The next restriction would cross a line Diana never expected, and she would be forced to choose how to respond. What would you do in this moment? The call came just after midnight, and it wasn't a request. The phone rang once, then again. Diana stared at it before answering, already bracing herself. Yes, she said quietly. You've been difficult, the voice on the other end stated, calm and unmistakably authoritative. She sat up straighter. I've been honest. A pause. Those are not the same thing. The line went dead. By morning, the pressure arrived in layers. Schedules changed without warning. Invitations were withdrawn. Doors that once opened with ease now required permission. Smiles felt rehearsed. Kindness felt conditional. At breakfast, an aide hovered closer than usual. You'll be accompanied today, she said gently. Diana looked up. I always am. The aide hesitated. More closely. Diana pushed her plate away. Appetite gone. Across the room, her sons laughed softly over something small and shared. She watched them, counting seconds, memorizing the sound. Later, a trusted face approached her near the gardens. They're worried, he said carefully. About what? Diana asked. About what you might say. Or write. Her heart skipped. Why would that concern them? He leaned closer. Because words last longer than appearances. She held his gaze. So do lies. He straightened, glancing around. You should consider staying quiet. For their sake. For whose sake? She asked. He didn't answer. That afternoon, the boys were ushered away early. No explanation. No warning. Diana followed instinctively. Where are you taking them? A guard stopped her. Orders. They didn't say goodbye, she said sharply. They'll see you later. When? Silence. She stood there long after they disappeared down the corridor. The echo of their footsteps fading like a closing door. Her chest tightened. Breath shallow. That evening, the mail arrived. Thin, ordinary, dangerous. Among the letters was one envelope marked with a familiar hand. Inside was a note. Short. Precise. You are being advised to reconsider certain personal communications. No signature. None needed. Diana returned to her room and locked the door. She paced once. Twice. Then stopped at the desk. The drawer opened smoothly. She took out the letter again. This time, she unfolded it. Her own words stared back at her. Raw, protective, unfiltered. She read them slowly, tears forming but never falling. They're trying to erase you, she whispered to the paper. And me. A knock sounded. Mum, a small voice called. She folded the letter instantly, slipping it into the book. Yes, darling, she answered, opening the door. He rushed into her arms. They said you were busy. She held him fiercely. I'm never too busy for you. He looked up at her. Are you in trouble? She paused, then smiled gently. No, but as she kissed his hair, her eyes drifted to the desk, to the place where truth waited. Because she knew now the pressure wouldn't stop. It would only tighten. They couldn't silence her heart. so they tried to surround it. The next move wouldn't come from outside the palace, but from someone Diana trusted most. He didn't knock, he already had permission. Diana looked up as the door opened, surprise flickering across her face. Of all people, she hadn't expected him. He smiled easily, familiar, trusted. Someone who had once promised to look out for her when no one else would. "You're awake?" he said lightly. "I usually am," she replied. "What is it?" He closed the door behind him with deliberate calm. Too calm. "They're concerned," he began. Her shoulders stiffened. "You too," he sighed, rubbing his temples as if burdened by her existence. "You're making things harder than they need to be." Diana stood. "For who?" "For everyone," he answered. "Especially the boys." The words twisted inside her. "You said you'd help me," she said quietly. "I did," he replied. "But you won't listen." She stepped closer. "Listen to what?" "To reason," he snapped, then softened his tone. "You've written something, haven't you?" Her breath caught. "Just slightly. Enough," he noticed. "That letter," he continued. "They know about it." Her heart slammed against her ribs. "I trusted you. And that's why I'm here," he said. "Give it to me." She stared at him, disbelief giving way to something colder. "So you can destroy it. So you can be safe," he insisted. "Safe from the truth?" she asked. He didn't answer immediately. His silence was louder than any confession. "They're watching," he finally said. "Everything. If you don't hand it over, they'll act." "On me?" she asked. His jaw tightened. "On your access." The threat didn't need clarification. Diana turned away, hands shaking. The desk stood before her. The drawer, the book, the letter. She had imagined this moment differently. She had imagined choosing when the truth would surface, not being cornered into surrender. "You promised," she said, voice breaking. "I'm still trying to protect you," he replied. She laughed softly. It startled them both. "No," she said, turning back to face him. "You're protecting them." The room filled with tension, thick and suffocating. Somewhere down the hall, a clock chimed softly, indifferent to betrayal. "Give it to me," he said again. Firmer now. She looked at him for a long moment, searching, mourning the person she thought he was. Then she shook her head. "I can't." His expression hardened. "Then you leave me no choice," he said. Within hours, everything changed. Her schedule was erased, her movements restricted. A meeting was cancelled without explanation. And worst of all, the boys didn't come that night. No bedtime story, no kiss, no laughter echoing down the hall. Diana sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the door long after it became clear they weren't coming. Her hands clenched in the fabric of her robe. She crossed the room and opened the drawer. The letter was still there, untouched, unbroken. "They can take everything else," she whispered, lifting it carefully. But not this. Outside, footsteps approached again. This time, they didn't stop. The man she trusted most was the one who cornered her hardest. By morning, Diana would lose something irreplaceable, and the letter would become her last weapon. The room felt colder when she realized the boys weren't coming back tonight. Morning light crept through the curtains, but it brought no warmth. Diana sat fully dressed on the edge of the bed, untouched tea cooling on the table beside her. She hadn't slept. Every sound in the hallway had felt like a warning. She stood slowly, steadying herself. If they thought isolation would break her, they were wrong. Down the corridor, a familiar aide stiffened when she saw Diana approaching. "I need my schedule," Diana said calmly. The aide hesitated. "It's been adjusted." "Then adjust it back," Diana replied. "I can't." Diana leaned closer, voice low but unshaking. "Find someone who can." Moments later, she was escorted into a small, quiet room. No cameras, no crowd, just a single table and 2 chairs. A man entered, already annoyed. "This is unnecessary," he said. "So is keeping children from their mother," Diana answered. He scoffed. "You're emotional again." She met his gaze. "I'm focused." He frowned. That was new. "I want time with my sons restored," she continued. "And I want it documented." "You don't have leverage," he replied. Diana reached into her bag but didn't remove anything. The gesture alone shifted the air. "You're wrong," she said. His eyes narrowed. "Is that a threat?" "It's a promise," she answered. "To my children." The meeting ended abruptly. No agreement. No apology. But when Diana left the room, something had changed. Whispers followed her again, but this time they carried unease. By afternoon, she was allowed a brief visit. The boys ran to her, clinging tightly. "They said you were busy," one murmured. She knelt, holding them close. "They were wrong." "Are you going away?" the other asked. Diana looked at them, really looked. The fear they tried to hide, the strength they didn't know they carried. "No," she said firmly. "I'm staying." That evening, back in her room, she sat at the desk and took out the letter once more. She read it aloud softly. as if letting the walls hear what had been denied for too long. Her voice didn't shake this time. She added one final line at the bottom. Short. Clear. Then she sealed it again. A knock came at the door. Yes? She called. You have visitors, a voice said. Visitors meant scrutiny, pressure. Another attempt to corner her. Diana stood, letter hidden, spine straight. Let them come. She wasn't hiding anymore. They taught her silence, but she chose resolve. The next confrontation would force Diana to reveal how far she was willing to go and who would pay the price. Was she right to fight back? The door closed behind her, and the tone in the room turned dangerous. The visitors were already seated when Diana entered. 3 figures, no smiles, no introductions. Power didn't bother with manners. She remained standing. This won't take long, one of them said. Good, Diana replied. Neither will I. A pause followed. Brief, irritated. You've been making waves, another voice added. That's unwise. Diana folded her hands calmly. So is underestimating a mother. The air tightened. We're concerned about your recent behavior, the first man said. Your insistence, your documents. Diana tilted her head. You mean my words? Silence again. You've crossed a line, he continued. No, she said evenly. I found one. The man across from her leaned forward. You forget where you are. Diana didn't blink. I remember exactly. They exchanged looks, measured, calculating. You're emotional, the second man said. And emotion leads to mistakes. She smiled faintly. So does arrogance. That did it. The chair scraped loudly as he stood. You think you have leverage. You don't. Diana reached into her bag, but again removed nothing. I don't need leverage, she said. I need time. For what? He demanded. To make sure my sons are never told lies about their mother. The room froze. The first man spoke carefully now. You're implying threats. I'm stating truths, Diana replied. And truths don't disappear when ignored. Another pause. Longer this time. We can make things very difficult, the second man said quietly. Diana's voice softened, but only just. You already have. They watched her closely now. Not as a problem, but as a variable. You leave us little choice, the first man said. She nodded once. You left me none first. The meeting ended without ceremony. No handshake, no resolution. Outside, Diana's steps echoed down the corridor, steady and unhurried. Inside, her heart pounded, but she didn't let it show. That evening, she was granted time with the boys again, closely supervised, limited, controlled. Still, when they ran to her, nothing else mattered. Did you win? One whispered. She kissed his forehead. Not yet. Are you scared? The other asked. She paused, then answered honestly. Yes. They held on to her tighter. Later that night, alone once more, Diana sat at the desk. The letter lay before her. She stared at it for a long time. They almost broke me today, she whispered. Almost. She folded the letter carefully and placed it somewhere new, somewhere no one would think to look. Outside, thunder rolled faintly across the sky. The storm had reached its peak. They thought fear would end her, but fear only sharpened her. By the next decision she made, there would be no turning back, and the truth would begin moving on its own. She hid the letter where no one would ever search for love. The morning arrived heavy with expectation. Diana dressed slowly, choosing simplicity over armor. Her reflection looked back steady now. No hesitation, no doubt. The storm from the night before hadn't passed. It had settled inside her. She reached for the book where the letter now rested, fingers brushing the spine once, reverently, before leaving it behind. The decision had already been made. Action didn't require permission. Downstairs, the palace moved like clockwork. Too smooth, too rehearsed. She walked through it as if through fog, nodding when required, smiling when expected. A familiar face intercepted her near the staircase. You're being watched closely today, he warned under his breath. She didn't stop walking. I always am. But today is different, he pressed. They're preparing something. So am I, she replied calmly. By midday, she was summoned again. This time, the room was larger. More people, more power, less patience. You've left us uneasy, one of them said. Diana folded her hands. That wasn't my intention. But it is the result, another replied. They studied her carefully, searching for cracks. They found none. You've been advised to let things settle, the first man continued. Diana tilted her head slightly. Some things rot when they settle. A sharp inhale rippled through the room. You're pushing us, he said coldly. No, she answered. I'm moving forward. Silence followed. Long, calculating. We can still contain this, someone offered. Diana looked at him then. Really looked. You can't contain words once they're loved. That was when she noticed it. The shift. The smallest fracture. Not in her, but in them. They didn't ask where the letter was. They already knew they'd lost control of it. That afternoon, she was allowed another brief visit with the boys. Shorter than before. Watched, counted. Still, she knelt and held their faces in her hands. "If anything changes," she said softly, "remember this. Everything I did was for you." "Why would things change?" one asked. She smiled gently. "Because truth moves." That night, Diana returned to her room alone. The silence no longer frightened her. It clarified. She sat at the desk and wrote one more note, just a name, a place, a date. Then she destroyed it. The letter no longer needed her protection. It was already on its way. Somewhere beyond the palace walls, a chain had begun. Quiet, invisible, unstoppable. And Diana finally allowed herself one breath of relief. You can cage a woman, but not the truth she sets free. By the time anyone tried to stop it, the letter would be far beyond their reach, and heading straight toward history. The phone rang, and this time they sounded afraid. Diana answered without greeting. "They know," the voice on the line said urgently. She closed her eyes once. "I assumed they would." "You don't understand," he continued. "It's already circulating." Quietly, carefully. Diana leaned against the window, watching the morning light spill over the gardens. Then it's begun. Within hours, the atmosphere shifted. Staff moved faster. Conversations stopped when she entered rooms. Doors closed a second too late. Power didn't vanish, but it wavered. At midday, she was summoned again. Different room, different faces, the same unease. "We want to resolve this calmly," one man said. Diana sat. "You should have wanted that earlier." He ignored the comment. "There are concerns about how certain narratives might be interpreted." She raised an eyebrow. "Narratives don't frighten you, truth does." A murmur passed between them. "You must consider the consequences," another added. "For your reputation, for the boys." Her voice sharpened. "My sons deserve honesty, not carefully managed silence." They studied her again, but this time something had changed. She wasn't alone anymore. Outside the palace, questions were forming. Not accusations yet. Curiosity, concern, the most dangerous kind. That afternoon she was granted extended time with her sons. No explanation, no apology. They ran to her laughing, unaware of the storm gathering beyond the walls. "You're smiling," one noticed. She nodded. "I remembered who I am." They sat together on the floor, building something fragile and temporary. A tower, a moment, a memory. "Will you always tell us the truth?" one asked suddenly. Diana didn't hesitate, even when it's hard. That evening, she returned to her room and found something waiting on her desk. The book was gone. Her heart stopped. She searched the drawer, the shelves, the bed. Nothing. Footsteps sounded behind her. "You won't find it," a voice said. She turned slowly. "We've secured it," the man continued. "For everyone's good." Diana met his gaze, calm settling over her like armor. "You're too late," she said. His brow furrowed. "What do you mean?" She stepped closer. "The words aren't in that book anymore." Silence stretched. "You moved it?" he asked sharply. She smiled, not cruelly, but with certainty. "I set it free." For the first time, he looked unsure. That night, Diana slept deeply. No guards at the door, no footsteps pacing, just quiet. Somewhere beyond the palace, the letter was being read by the right eyes, at the right moment, and once read, it could never be unread. They tried to bury her voice, but it had already found daylight. The next reaction wouldn't come from the palace, but from the world beyond its walls. The first question came from outside the gates, and it wouldn't be the last. It began quietly, almost politely. A request for clarification, a question framed as concern. Diana heard about it secondhand, whispered by someone who could no longer hide their unease. "They're asking," the aide said softly. Diana didn't look up from the window. They always do, eventually. By noon, the whispers multiplied. Phones rang unanswered. Meetings were postponed. Statements were drafted, then rewritten, then abandoned. Control thrived on certainty, and certainty was slipping. She was summoned again, but this time the tone had changed. "We need cooperation," a man said carefully. Diana took her seat. "You always did." He ignored the remark. "There are interpretations circulating that could be damaging." "Truth doesn't damage," she replied. "Exposure does." A sharp breath cut through the room. "You're enjoying this," another accused. Diana met his gaze steadily. "No, I endured it." Silence followed. Heavy, uncomfortable. Outside, beyond the walls, the world was doing what it always did when secrecy cracked. Leaning closer, not attacking, not accusing, listening. That afternoon, Diana walked with her sons in the gardens, the air unusually still. No sudden interruptions, no abrupt endings. You're holding my hand tighter, one of them noticed. She smiled faintly. I just want to feel you here. Are you sad? He asked. She shook her head. I'm steady. Later, alone again, she found a note slipped beneath her door. We need to talk urgently. She folded it once and placed it aside. For the first time, urgency belonged to someone else. That evening, she was invited, not summoned, to a private discussion. Smaller room, softer lighting, familiar faces. Now cautious. We underestimated you, one admitted. Diana listened, expression unreadable. You've complicated things, another added. She nodded. You complicated them first. A long pause. What do you want? The first man finally asked. Diana leaned forward slightly. Time, truth, and my children, without conditions. They exchanged glances. The cost of refusal was growing clearer by the second. We can't promise everything, he said. I didn't ask for promises, she replied. I asked for decency. When the meeting ended, nothing was signed. Nothing official. But when Diana stepped back into the corridor, she felt it. The balance had shifted. That night, she tucked her sons into bed herself. No hovering. No interruptions. Will tomorrow be better? One whispered. Diana kissed his forehead. Tomorrow will be honest. After they slept, she stood alone in the doorway, watching them breathe. The fear that once ruled her chest had loosened its grip. Somewhere beyond the palace, conversations continued. Pages turned. Words weighed. The truth was no longer hers alone. And the palace, so practiced at control, had finally lost it. The palace mastered silence, but it never learned how to survive truth. What came next wouldn't be negotiation. It would be reckoning. And Diana would face it head-on. The apology came wrapped in formality, and it meant nothing to her. The letter arrived just before dawn, slid quietly beneath her door. Diana read it standing, barefoot on the cold floor, eyes scanning words chosen by committee rather than conscience. Regret. Misunderstanding. Moving forward. She folded it once and set it aside. By mid-morning she was invited to speak, not behind closed doors this time, but in a room where windows faced outward. Symbolic. Transparent. Too late. We acknowledge your distress, a man began carefully. Diana remained silent. We hope to rebuild trust, another added. She looked up then. Trust isn't rebuilt with hope. It's rebuilt with change. They shifted uncomfortably. You must understand the pressure we were under, the first man said. Diana stood slowly. The movement alone stilled the room. I understand pressure, she replied. I lived under it while raising children in fear. A pause. Heavy. Earned. You want cooperation, she continued. Then listen. They did. She spoke without raising her voice. About boundaries. About time. About dignity. About her sons growing up without whispered warnings or managed distance. Every sentence landed cleanly. No emotion wasted. No anger spilled. One man finally said, this will require adjustment. She nodded. Growth usually does. That afternoon, Diana walked freely through the palace gardens with her sons. No escort hovering too close. No abrupt endings. Why is everyone nicer today? One asked. She smiled faintly. Because they're paying attention. Later, a familiar figure approached her. Someone who had once dismissed her concerns. You were right, he admitted quietly. She studied him for a moment. That's not what matters. What does? He asked. That it doesn't happen again. As evening settled, Diana returned to her room. The desk looked different now. Not like a battlefield, but like a place of record. She opened a fresh page and wrote a single sentence. Not for the world, not for power, for her sons. She closed the book and placed it carefully back where it belonged. A knock came at the door. Mum? A small voice asked. She opened it instantly. Will you read to us? He asked. She knelt, smiling fully now. Of course. As she tucked them in, she realized something quietly profound. The fear that once dictated her choices no longer held authority. Not because the world had changed, but because she had. She stood in the doorway long after they slept, watching their chests rise and fall, anchoring herself to the moment. The reckoning hadn't ended everything, but it had given her something far more powerful than victory. Stillness. She didn't raise her voice. She raised the standard. What remained was one final choice. How history would remember the words she had set free. The decision wasn't about hiding the letter anymore. It was about letting it live. The room was quiet except for the soft tick of the clock. Diana sat alone at the desk, the same place where fear once guided her hand. Now, clarity did. The letter no longer felt fragile. It felt complete. She read it one final time, not as a woman under siege, but as a mother who had endured. Each line carried the weight of nights spent awake, of smiles worn as armor, of love expressed where voices were denied. Footsteps approached, then stopped. You asked to see me, a familiar voice said. Yes, Diana replied without turning. He entered cautiously, as if stepping into history rather than a room. You've been given options, he said. Controlled release, redactions. Diana faced him fully. That letter was never meant to be controlled. He hesitated. It could define how you're remembered. She nodded slowly. That's why it must be honest. Silence stretched between them. You're certain? He asked. She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she folded the letter once, carefully, and placed it into an envelope. Not hidden, not guarded, certain. I spent years being explained, she said. I won't be edited. The man lowered his gaze. Then it will change things. Diana's voice softened, but didn't waver. It already has. Later that day, she walked with her sons through the gardens again. No rush, no watchers interrupting. One of them looked up at her suddenly. Why does everyone keep saying your name? She smiled gently. Because names carry stories. Is yours a good one? He asked. She crouched to meet his eyes. It's a true one. That evening she sealed the envelope and handed it to someone she trusted. Someone who understood timing, weight, and consequence. This isn't for today, Diana said. When? He asked. When it's needed, she replied. He nodded and left without another word. Night fell softly. Diana stood by the window, watching the lights flicker on across the grounds. The palace felt different now, less imposing, less final. For the first time, she didn't feel watched. She felt witnessed. She returned to her son's room and sat beside them as they slept. She brushed a curl from one forehead, then the other. If the world ever reads it, she whispered, know it was written with love. She stood, turning off the light. Behind her, the room settled into quiet certainty. The letter was no longer a secret. It was a promise, waiting for its moment. She didn't write for history. History would write itself around her words. Years later, when the letter finally surfaced, the world would realize it hadn't just revealed Diana. It had been preparing her sons all along. The envelope waited on the table, untouched, undeniable, final. Years had passed, but the room felt strangely familiar, quiet, heavy with things unsaid. The letter lay between them, cream-colored edges softened by time, its presence louder than any voice. The sons stood there now, not boys anymore, taller, broader, carrying questions they had learned not to ask aloud. One of them reached for the envelope, then stopped. She wrote this for us? He asked quietly. Yes, came the answer. Steady, certain. The seal broke with a soft sound that seemed to echo. The paper unfolded slowly, as if resisting the moment it had waited so long to meet. The first line was simple. My darling boys. Silence filled the room. They read without interruption, line after line, words written by a mother who had known fear but refused to let it define love. She spoke of protection without bitterness, of truth without accusation, of strength without resentment. One breath hitched. She knew, he murmured. The other nodded slowly. She always knew. The letter didn't expose scandals. It revealed motives. It didn't attack. It explained. It didn't ask for sympathy. It asked for understanding. If you ever feel alone, she had written, remember you were never unprotected. I stood between you and every storm. One of them lowered the page, eyes glassy. Why didn't they tell us? Because silence was easier. The answer came quietly. They finished the letter together. No rushing, no skipping lines. Every word earned its place. When it ended, no one spoke. The weight of it settled, not like grief, but like clarity. She didn't want revenge, one finally said. No, the other agreed. She wanted us ready. Outside, the world continued unaware that something had just shifted forever. One of them folded the letter carefully, not to hide it, to honor it. They tried to define her, he said, but she defined us. The room felt warmer now, lighter. The letter had done what it was meant to do. It hadn't reopened wounds, it had closed them. Somewhere beyond that room, voices would soon rise. Headlines would form, opinions would clash. But inside, something far more important had already happened. A mother's voice, long delayed, had finally reached the people it was always meant for. And it had changed everything. They didn't inherit her crown. They inherited her courage. When the letter reached the public next, the world would be forced to confront not a myth, but the mother they had never truly seen. The world read the letter and fell silent. When the words reached the public, they didn't arrive with spectacle. No dramatic announcement, no performance, just ink on paper, steady, maternal, unafraid. And yet, everything shifted. People expected anger, accusations, secrets sharpened like weapons. Instead, they found love, context. A mother explaining the quiet choices she made when noise would have cost her children peace. The reaction was immediate and unfamiliar. She wasn't what we were told, one voice said. She was protecting them, another whispered. The letter didn't rewrite events. It reframed them. Suddenly, moments once labeled fragile looked deliberate. Silences once mocked now felt strategic. Pain, once dismissed, revealed discipline. The sons watched it unfold from a distance. Not detached, but grounded. That was her plan, one said quietly. The other nodded. She trusted time. Across the world, conversations changed tone. Less judgment, more reflection. People didn't ask what she should have done anymore. They asked what it must have cost her. The palace issued statements, carefully worded, polished, late. They didn't matter, because the letter didn't need defense. It stood on its own. Years of speculation collapsed under the weight of a single truth. She had been neither weak nor reckless. She had been precise. She loved louder than fear, someone wrote. And for once, the words fit. The sons returned the letter to its place. Not locked away, not displayed, preserved. As it was always meant to be. One of them paused before closing the cover. She knew this day would come, he said. Yes, the other replied. Just not when. Outside, the world kept spinning. Faster than before. Louder than ever. But something rare had happened. Understanding. Not unanimous. Not perfect. But real. And that was enough. The story of Diana no longer belonged to headlines or whispers. It belonged where it always should have. To truth, to context, to love expressed under pressure. In the end, the letter didn't change history. It clarified it. A mother wasn't asking to be forgiven. She was asking to be seen. And at last, she was. She was never broken by the crown. She was forged beneath it. If kindness still matters, comment, she was seen. Ready for the full story reflection.